All right, how about another civics question that's worth asking? And today I want to take some time and address what's the difference between civil rights and civil liberties. I'm Matt Haskell. I'm a high school history, government, and civics teacher at a small rural public school in south central Illinois. And today's question is one that it'll come up often in government, and then you also see it addressed in history, of course, and then also in law. And, when it comes down to civil rights and civil liberties, the two terms do sound, remarkably similar, and they could easily get, switched back and forth. They are related, of course, and they do sometimes overlap, but they're not exactly the same thing. And there's a really simple way to understand the difference. Civil liberties are protections from government power. Civil rights are protections from unequal treatment. So civil liberties are about freedom, where civil rights would be about equality. When it comes to civil liberties, they usually limit what the government can do to you. Civil rights often require government to protect people from things like discrimination or exclusion or unequal treatment. Now, the difference between the two is pretty important because civil liberties are freedoms that we often connect with the Bill of Rights. Freedom of speech, religion, press, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, the right to due process, the right to a fair trial, protection from cruel and unusual punishment. Those are limits on government power, and they tell government that there are lines that it can't cross, that you have a lane that you have to stay in. That means government is not, it can't silence you simply because it dislikes your opinion. We've been through that in several other videos now, especially when we dealt with the freedom of speech. Now, we also have to remember, going back a few videos too, that government cannot punish you without due process. But there's things like the government can't search your home without legal limits, like having a warrant. Government can't force you to follow one official religion. That's the basic idea behind civil liberties. They protect individual freedoms by keeping the government in a box. Civil rights, on the other hand, focus on equal treatment under the law. Civil rights ask whether people are being treated fairly and equally by the government and by public institutions, and sometimes by private areas, private actors in areas like employment, housing, education, and then public accommodations. So civil rights are connected to questions like, can people vote without discrimination? Can people attend public school equally? Can people serve on juries? Do they have access to public facilities? Can people be hired or housed or educated or served without unlawful discrimination? Can government treat one group of people differently from another without a valid constitutional reason? These questions are especially connected to the 14th Amendment, which says that no state shall deny any person equal protection of the laws. Now, that phrase is really important in the 14th Amendment because equal protection is one of the foundations for civil rights. It means government cannot simply create one set of rules for one group and another set of rules for another group without having a specific justification. And now, looking back at American history, we can see why that distinction really matters. After the Civil War, we get the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendments added to the Constitution, the Reconstruction Amendments. And they abolished slavery, they established birthright citizenship and equal protection, and also prohibited the denial of voting rights based on race. But even after those amendments, there were many states that still used segregation, intimidation, poll taxes, literacy tests, and any number of discriminatory laws that were used to deny equal citizenship when it came to practice. That's why the civil rights struggle became so important. And the issue was not whether people had freedom from government interference. The issue was whether government would protect equal citizenship, equal access, equal voting rights, and equal treatment under the law. Now, in the scheme here, civil liberties and civil rights can overlap. So, for example, Free speech is a civil liberty. But if a government allowed one group to protest while denying another group the same opportunity because of race, religion, or viewpoint, that could also become a civil rights issue. So the religious freedom then becomes, another example of civil liberty. But discrimination against religious minorities can also raise civil rights concerns. Due process is a civil liberty, but if due process is applied differently depending on wealth or race or status or power, then equal protection becomes part of that conversation as well. So the categories are not always perfectly separate, but the basic distinction is still useful. Civil liberties are mostly about protecting people from government abuse. Civil rights are mostly about protecting people from unequal treatment. So civil liberties would say government must not violate this freedom. Civil rights would say government must not deny equal protection or allow unlawful discrimination. And both of these are essential to living in a republic, in a representative democracy, because a country can have some liberty without any real equality. A person might technically have rights on paper, but if those rights aren't applied equally, then freedom is incomplete. And at the same time, a country can claim to pursue equality while violating liberty. So if government ignores speech and religion and due process and privacy or individual rights in the name of equality, then liberty is in danger. And so a constitutional republic has to care about both civil liberties and civil rights. Freedom matters, equality matters, rights matter, limits on power, equal protection. All those things matter, and this is one of the reasons why civic debates can be difficult, because some rights seem to point in different directions. A free speech claim may collide with an anti-discrimination concern. A religious liberty claim may run up against an equal access concern. Due process may collide with a public safety concern. A voting rights issue could raise questions about both equal protection and state authority. These aren't always easy questions to deal with, but understanding the vocabulary helps us have better arguments, better discourse. So when we talk about civil liberties, we're usually asking, what is government forbidden from doing to individuals? And when we talk about civil rights, we're usually asking, is everyone receiving equal protection, equal access, excuse me, and equal treatment under the law? And both those questions are important, because if we only protect liberty, but we ignore equality, the rights may become privileges for people with If we only pursue equality, but we ignore liberty, government may become too powerful over individual lives. And the American system is built around that tension between both of the principles. Now, that tension that exists between the two things is not always real comfortable, but they are central to a constitutional government. So, to wrap things up here, what's the difference between civil rights and civil liberties? Civil liberties protect individual freedoms from government overreach, and civil rights protect people from unequal treatment and discrimination. Civil liberties are about freedom. Civil rights are about equality. And a healthy republic needs both civil liberties and civil rights. So the real civic question is not whether liberty matters more than equality, or that equality matters more than liberty. The real question would come down to is whether we can protect individual freedom while also insisting that the law apply fairly to everyone. So hopefully I was able to help that.